welcome, and thank you guys for being here. Welcome to COSME and the COSME Astrology Podcast. If you know me, and if you don't know me, my name is Lisa Warman. I'm a practicing astrologer. I'm the founder of COSME Astrology, and this is my community space. I started this space because I feel like there is a lot of wisdom, a lot of empowerment, a lot of connection that comes through when we're one-to-one in person and we're able to speak the language of astrology with each other. It's really lovely to have the World Wide Web and to have social media. I think it's great. And it definitely has a place. I'm not hating on it, but there's just so much that comes through when we're in person. So thank you all for being here. It takes all of you to create this kind of energy, and it's just wonderful. So we are going to be talking about the April 2024 Astrology Forecast today. We're going to focus on the eclipses. We're also going to focus on Jupiter and Taurus. Jupiter conjunct Uranus and Taurus, I'm sorry. So it's going to be really interesting. At the end of the podcast, we're going to take about 20 minutes, so you guys will be able to ask any questions that relate to the podcast. So we'll have a Q&A. You can ask myself, Taylor, or Nicholas here, and we're happy to answer the questions for you. So it has been a minute, I would say, since October, right? Mm-hmm. Since I've had Taylor on the show. And Taylor is our co-host. Taylor's been Scorpio mooning and taking a little hiatus. Yeah. So Taylor, how's it going? Like, how are you? Welcome back.
I'm good. It's been good having my winter time, Scorpio time of being in my little cave and resting. So I'm really excited to be back here. And I was just commenting, it was like eclipse to eclipse season.
That's
so
true.
we sort of eclipsed on the show, and here we are.
You did eclipse on the show.
Yeah.
And now you're back. So back
you.
in business. So thanks for being here. And our special guest astrologer, who most of you are all of you are here to see. We have Nicholas Polimenakos, and we're so excited to have him on the show. So a little bit about Nicholas. Nicholas is an astrologer with over 20 years of professional experience in astrology readings and consultations. He has worked at bookstores, astrological conferences for over a decade. Nicholas has also helped out with NORWAC, and that's the Northwest Astrology Conference, as a tech advisor over the years, including helping converting the conference to an online model during COVID. That's such a huge deal, so high five to you. Nicholas was part of the conference team for the ESAR conference in 2022 as a tech advisor in ad sales. Nicholas is currently focused on one-to-one sessions with clients and his YouTube channel, Sparkles of Gold, discussing astrology and intuitive modalities. So speaking of Nicholas's YouTube, if you have not checked it out, then you are missing out. I found Nicholas on Instagram, actually. I can't remember if someone sent me his profile or if I found it on my own. But I noticed it right away, and I was like, okay, this is really interesting. So then I started watching his YouTube, and I immediately started absorbing his content. There's so much creativity and inspiration laced into his astrology work. So that comes from original audio that he creates, and also these beautiful visuals that just coincide with the music and the astrology. So check it out if you haven't. But Nicholas, we're so excited to have you here. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Lisa, for bringing me on and contacting me. And you did something rare when you were doing the announcement, is you said my name correctly, like perfect.
Oh.
And so, it's always a thing. My first day of school was always an adventure, and I got to the P's. Everyone looked back. No teacher ever said it correctly except the English teachers. But you just dialed it in. So thank you.
Yes.
So you must have some Greek in you.
I think it was the Greek restaurant I worked at for like my whole childhood and early teenage years. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you. But overall, thanks for inviting me here on the podcast. And also your vision and your intention for what you're trying to do with this space and the podcast. And, we'll be honest here about conversation you and I had last night about how important it is to be in-person spaces and relating, especially out of the last so many years that we're coming out of. And if we centralize our focus in the astrology world, how important that is, and how some of that was lost during the pandemic, with smaller organizations in the country just kind of faltered and disappeared. And also with newer astrologers and generations of people who are connected online, but and thrive that way. But maybe after all this, something is missing. There's a void. There's something else. There's a thirst for something, and the thirst is basically being human in spaces like this. So, I commend you for your vision, what you're trying to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah. It's definitely inspired from astrology conferences, because I remember the first time I went to an astrology conference, I couldn't even believe that I could be in a room with 100 astrologers and be able to speak the language. It really just blew my mind open, and it was such an amazing, empowering experience. And it was actually OPA, and I met Taylor there, and I tracked Taylor down the bathroom and asked if we could be friends. But
And I remember when you stopped me at this dead end, and you were like, "Hold on," and I was like, "Oh boy, okay."
it was actually during eclipse season, and it was the Taurus and Scorpio axis, and it was very close to an eclipse. So we'll talk about that a little later as we talk about eclipses, these portals that can open up for you when it's an eclipse, and how that can manifest over time. But I am just grateful. So thank you guys all again for being here and being part of this. Again, this is a community space. It takes all of you, and it takes all of your energy to make this happen. And also, I have a videographer here today. His name's Abram Cooper. He's over here. So he will be shooting the podcast for us. And then I also have Lance Thorne, who introduced himself a little earlier. If you guys do not want to be in any photos, or if you have a question during the Q&A and you don't want it recorded, if you could just please let Lance know or raise your hand, just so you can opt out of that. But this will be posted on YouTube. Okay, so
I just want to say my first conference was the one in Norwalk, 2020,
yes,
that you helped to convert online. So I feel like this is a really full circle moment, and I just want to give you your props, because that was so enormously huge to be moving that space online. You got me and, I don't know, hundreds of other astrologers going during the pandemic. So thank you, Nicholas.
Sure. Yeah, I was a little part of it all. Laura Nalbandian, who runs the conference, came to me and asked me, do you think we could do this? And I'm like, I don't know. Let's go for it. So I must have interviewed you a prep. Did we do a Zoom call before it all happened? Sometimes I do that with speakers, but you and I have a funny history too.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
I made one of the best phone calls I've made in the last so many years to Taylor. So something happened. I was, as you mentioned, I was doing a lot of tasks for that ESAR conference. Officially, the ad person and other things, but there's all this other stuff I was doing behind something else. But I had to sell ads. And for conference programs, it's a big deal. The front and back page, the inside pages, all the vendors, everybody's trying to get those pages. So there's a raffle. And so, personally, I'm taking everybody's name down, and I have to pull names out of a hat. And so I pulled the name out to get the first choice, and it was Taylor's name. It's usually some software company like Astro Gold or SolarFire or some major something, but she had first dibs, first choice. So I called her, and I'm like, hey, you can do this. You can pick wherever. And so what did you pick? The back?
Back
the
cover.
primo spot of a
That's
program. So
amazing.
imagine a program, you go through, and the back is full face, So I really enjoyed making that phone call.
It was pretty cool. Pretty rad.
yes, that was also around the eclipses, right? No.
No.
Okay.
No.
Anyway, well, I know it did open up a portal
It
for
did.
you.
It did,
So yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Yes. So we're all connected, and that's the beauty of astrology and astrologers, the astrological community. There's so much room for connection and just sharing this beautiful language. So let's get to it, I think. So today we are going to go over and talk about the April 2024 astrology forecast. So just to give all of you a little preview of how it's going to go. We will talk about the important transits for April, and then we're going to go ahead and talk about eclipse season, which we're basically in. We will go ahead and talk about Jupiter conjunct Uranus in Taurus. We are all big fans of astrology books, and I know I'm a collector. Nicholas, you're also a collector. Taylor, you're a collector and scanner.
Yes.
So we are going to give a few references for books and just kind of talk about them a little bit at the end. And then we're going to close it out and have a Q&A. So again, if anything pops up during the forecast and you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and ask. All right. So the astrological overview for 2024. I want to start off a little before April because in March, on March 20th, the sun is going to enter Aries, and that is the spring equinox. On the 25th, we have the lunar eclipse in Libra at 5 degrees, and this is happening at 12 a.m. I love that time, Pacific time. And then for April, some important transits are going to be April 1st. Mercury on April 1st, which is wild to me. It's almost like a joke. But April 1st, Mercury retrogrades in Aries. On the 5th, Venus is going to enter Aries. On the 5th also, the sun is going to conjoin the North Node in Aries. And the moon is going to do something pretty cool. And I think you actually spoke about this on your Instagram, or you posted about it. And we'll kind of get into that. But yeah, the moon is basically going to cruise through every planet really quickly. And then April 8th, we do have a total solar eclipse in Aries at 19 degrees, and it's going to conjoin Chiron. April 10th, Mars conjoins Saturn. On the 15th, Mercury conjoins Chiron. 17th, Venus conjoins the North Node. On the 19th, the sun enters Taurus. 21st, the sun is going to square Pluto. 23rd, we have a full moon in Scorpio. On the 25th, Mercury stations direct, and then on the 29th, Venus is going to enter Taurus. So that's just like a lineup of some important transits. But do you guys want to add to that at all and give any details about any of those without going into the eclipses?
Wow.
Because I know that's a lot.
It's a hit parade. Obviously you mentioned 25th, the first eclipse, but some of the things that have been happening even the last couple of weeks. And as we go into March 25th eclipse, which that chart up is up on the wall here, is pretty much a setup here, for the next couple of weeks. And even after the April 8th eclipse, that story continues with some of the aspects that you mentioned here. So, it's, you can take the mindset. It's like, kind of waiting for the official day. Let's say this March 25th eclipse is the guy you're waiting for, but really it's now, so if you can get that in your head, for those here, for those watching later, it's a little different, but to me, that's just, that's how I look at things, as those of you who know what I do on YouTube, I'm always talking about story, and how stories are building and the ebb and flow, and really the story never ends, but I'm a huge opera fan, so I look at things as an opera and the characters and the plot and story. And operas are just dramatic, and that's what life is, really. And we get the calm moments. But anyway, we're in a dramatic part of the story here. We're leading up to the eclipses. So with a lot of concentration of, if we were to think about it as energy, with a lot of Aries and a lot of Pisces stuff. So, but yeah, those are some things at the top of my head there. But you want to jump right into the 25th?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. How are you feeling about that, Taylor?
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's go. Lunar eclipse in Libra at 5 degrees on the 25th. Nicholas, do you have any insight to that and the story that is happening?
Yeah, is for those of you looking up at the chart right now, I'm just curious. And, if you don't know your chart, if you don't know your specifics, but I'm just curious if anybody in here has anything in cardinal signs at 5 degrees. Several of you. Yeah. So you're definitely on the stage with this eclipse. The other part of this is we don't want to forget Chiron and all this, even though it's not at 5 degrees, it being at 20 or at 18 degrees here too, that it's definitely part of this eclipse. And I'm not discounting it, knowing that it's, exactly on the April 8th one, but I think it's there,
Mm-hmm.
So, well, we want to keep things really simple. When we look at any lunation, and when I say lunation, it's like new moon, full moon, right? And we like to look at the rulerships of that. I like to keep it simple. And so when we're looking at this Aries sun at 5 degrees and the moon at 5 Libra, they're opposite of each other. This is an opposition, and this is what a full moon is. And we look to the rulers of things. So the ruler of this particular eclipse would be the planet that rules the moon in Libra, which is Venus. And so we go look to where Venus is in the chart, and it's here in Pisces. And what's really interesting here is today, actually, as we record this, we're at the 16th.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I could do this right now since I'm going on the fly, and this is how I do things. I want to show you something here, and I'll explain it for the audio. If you're looking up at the chart right now, you could see Venus at 6 degrees, and it's in between Mars and Saturn. In a rough sense, this is what they call an enclosure. Basically, Venus slowly has kind of brought a story from Aquarius into Pisces, but kind of, it's in between two planets, Saturn and Mars. And traditionally, these planets they're called malefics, and they have a tendency to bring more challenging situations. It's not like Jupiter and Venus, who are called benefics. But we want to just look at where Venus is right here, right? In between Mars and Saturn. So saying that, we got that picture, right? So we just do that, and we'll go back to the eclipse, okay? And here, we're going to look at the ruler that I mentioned, which was here it's Venus and Pisces is 16 degrees, and you could see, it's past Mars and Saturn. But it's carrying that story of first touching Mars, then being in between Mars and Saturn, like it is today, and then when we look at this eclipse, it's afterwards. So it's not like we just look at Venus and Pisces and we look at it as the ruler of this and say, oh, Venus is at home in Pisces. It is. It flows there. I think there are tattoos of Mars and Saturn on Venus here, and has kind of had a little bit of a reality check because it went through Saturn here. And so that, to me, is part of this lunation. And as we're looking and breaking it down to the rulership of this. And so when we're looking at the Aries in Libra archetypes, obviously it has to do with relationships because it's Libra and the politics of relationships. And then we have Aries, which I look at as the relationship to self, in a sense, too, of putting oneself first in the will, and how these two signs combat each other at times, but need each other, and because they're on a polarity axis, and how they do their relationship. So obviously, since Venus is involved here, this is about relationships in general. And so it all depends on your chart and how you're relating to this, if it's like a significant other or relationships in general. But at least we have the setup here for like a way and a hope of being in relationships with Venus and Pisces, but still a little with a shell and a tattoo of a reality check of Saturn in Pisces. What do you think about some of this?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's definitely about relationships. I've got a bit of a radical take, and maybe because of my background in like HR and stuff, I'm always thinking about, you said political relationships. I think this, like the thing that comes to mind for me is like, F that, F this, it's over. If you want to use this to radicalize like a group of people, go do it.
because there's a ton of protection in this chart. And so there's some stuff that you can't necessarily see on this chart, but I'll tell you, speaking of Venus, I think that's an amazing point. Venus is actually sextile to the, which is 60 degrees, which is a beneficial aspect to the midpoint of Jupiter and Uranus, right? So Jupiter is abundance, bounty, blessings, expanding. Uranus is kind of the sudden change, something different, something radical. That midpoint's about 18, right? Well, what you can't see is that white moon Selena is right there at 18, Taurus. And white moon Selena is a theoretical point where the moon is at its perigee, which is closest to Earth. And it's a sign and a symbol of guardian angel protection. So when I look at this, I see everything that's going on with CEOs, executive pay, things that are really out of control, and people saying, we're fed up, we're done. And if you were to use this energy in a positive way, it would be to get together with a group of people and say, this is what we want and this is what we need. But I'm afraid people are going to be a little burnt out.
That's really interesting. I think they may be a little bit burnt out, but I mean, you know, eclipses, like the way that I have experienced eclipses is they really are portals. Like they are these life-changing portals, and it doesn't happen right away. It doesn't happen all at once. So like Nicholas said, it's kind of a story. So if people are burnt out, maybe they initiate this initiation. That's definitely like an Aries word, and they start moving forward with it. And it just starts to not manifest, but, you know, show itself over time, because, you know, these eclipses go until March 29th, 2025, I believe. Yeah. So it could be the start of that. But yeah, I think eclipses are, they're always fated.
Yeah.
They are divine intervention from the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a time where course correction happens. It's a really important time for people in general, especially who are experiencing this in a very personal way in their chart. So I see what both of you are saying. I think identity, relationship to self, that's such a big, those are keywords for this. Also relationship and partnership. You mentioned like work and banding together and, you know, making sure that we get what we want as the individual. Mm-hmm. I personally think there's a few other things that are going to start to come up during these eclipses. One would be gender identity. I think that's definitely, because we are talking about identity here, I think gender identity is going to be a big focus, perhaps even new discoveries, because Aries is an initiating energy. On the flip side, military action, war, but then also alliances and treaties could come from this. Mm-hmm. We may see, because of Aries, some fires, and also this is really going to impact like the laws and the elections here. So those are just some broad strokes, keywords that I think are going to come up.
Yeah, you brought, Taylor, you brought up something about when you're talking about that midpoint, but you touched upon something here too, from basic astrology level here to pay attention to with Venus and Jupiter. You could see Venus is in Pisces, right? And Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. Okay? Yes. Hear you. Hear you.
Those dogs?
That's Mars, Aries. Yeah.
They agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's Venus in Pisces that's ruled by Jupiter. And we go look at this chart, and there's Jupiter in Taurus that's ruled by Venus. Mm-hmm. Anybody in the crowd know what we would call this? Mutual reception. Yeah, so basically, if you don't know what that means, they're in their natural places there, like they're sextiling each other, like Taylor mentioned, okay, Venus and Jupiter, but their rulers are exchanged, and so there's a reception going on. It's mutual. There's a commonality. Remember, with sextiles, the key word to use for that aspect is it's opportunistic. It's opportunity. There's a way of relating. Here, it's water to earth, which some of you know I'm always talking about water to earth relationships, but here, in that sense, let's say if you were one to be worried about this eclipse and worried about these relational situations is that you can look to that exchange between Venus and Jupiter to problem solve or to connect. So basic, Venus has an idealistic dream in a way of all-encompassing love in the sign of Pisces, right? And thinking as of the whole, right? And so Jupiter in Taurus wants to kind of is on a quest in the story that deals with resources and the creation of our own resources and from an organic earth-based level. And so if you could take those two types of things and can they communicate with each other and find a conduit, find an opportunity, find a new way of looking at something as a vessel to help with, let's say, something that's karmic or fated in a sense, because those are what eclipses are. Can someone, if they're in a situation that's affected by the eclipse and know that something has to change, remember, eclipses are major doors closing and opening at the same time, okay? And if it's intense, how can they remediate that, and how can you use it or at least try to understand it? So for me, using the Jupiter-Venus connection in here would be the way to do it, right? One more thing I would say here is if you're looking here at the chart, and there's Mercury in Aries right here, okay? And it's not retrograde yet, okay? So it's at 23 degrees. But when we hit April 1st, as was mentioned earlier, that's when Mercury is going to station retrograde. So you have to know, you have to pay attention to Mercury here, because Mercury is really going to carry the story that's happening right now into this date, to April 8th eclipse, and even afterwards, because it's going to touch upon these eclipse degrees in certain places, okay? So now we're dealing with, we have the Venus-Jupiter connection that we can use, but it's what comes out of our brain, our thoughts and processes, and how we compute, and how it is delivered through Aries. And this is key, because through Aries, that's fire, and there's no balancing. Let's say if Mercury was in Libra, thinking about everyone else's voice, wanting everything to be harmonious. Mercury in Aries is thinking self first. There's no filters. There's no filters. So for better or worse, right? So again, it's like stuff like these dynamics with everything that the three of us have brought up is like, in the end, it's like what is said in the end, and how is it said, and what comes out of those situations. And let's say if it's an example that you were talking about, Taylor, kind of a riled up thing, get everybody together, and we're going to get together and we're going to change something, we're going to do something. This way of relating doesn't work anymore like it used to, right? And, Mercury in Aries way can come about very caustic,
Yeah, and I mean, you've got Mars, which is ruling the sun in Pisces, where it's traditionally not so happy. Mm-hmm. But I like to subvert the Hellenistic traditional rules and say, okay, well, what if Mars did have some dignity? Like, how would capitalism and patriarchy be subverted if we took that lens to Mars and Pisces? And it's the warrior for peace. And it's there with Saturn, which is perseverance and tenacity and long-term commitment to a thing, something that can last a really long time.
Which you're talking about Mars, Saturn there, and eventually Mars is going to catch up to Saturn. As you see in this chart currently for the recording, we're looking at this chart. It's Mars in Pisces at 1 degree, right? Just entered in and ingressed. And then we have Saturn at 12 degrees, which is such an important degree, by the way, I'll talk about later. But to go off what you said there, that they're eventually going to be together mathematically, continue the story that Taylor's talking about. And that actually pretty much is happening in the second eclipse that we're going to talk about. It's in several weeks. So anyway, we can keep going, but is there anything else here you see? I'm just curious if you're catching anything else here with this chart.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's one other thing. So I will look at the asteroids sometimes because I'm looking at the sun and the moon, and there's not a whole lot, which is why we focused on Venus and Jupiter and stuff. But Pallas Athena is actually at 8 degrees of Sagittarius, which is within a 3-degree orb of the sun and the moon. So that's making another sextile. And when something's sextile and trine, if anyone remembers the name, I can't remember. It fell out of my brain like 3 months ago. But it's got this cool name where it's like a lever of something because it's at that trine and sextile degree. So when you have Pallas Athena, which is the asteroid of strategy, at this really powerful leverage place, it means that you can use this strategically. You can weave a new pattern. You can weave a new tapestry if you want. And so in a lighthearted way, maybe you'll look around your house and be like, it's time to redecorate, or you know what, I'd like some new jewelry or something like that.
Totally. And I love that you brought up strategy, because I think it's, although there are two malefics on April 10th when Mars does conjoin Saturn, there's a little bit of like, I don't know how I would say this, maybe like Saturn kind of helps the Mars in a way, because I think of Mars as the ruler of Aries, and then I also think of Mars as the traditional ruler of Scorpio. And when I think of Mars in like Scorpio, I think more of strategy, right? Like there's a little more strategy there. And then Mars in Aries is kind of like that foot on the gas, go, So I think, who said it? Rick Levine said like ready, fire, aim or something like that. So
Right.
it's that energy. And, I think about this in the way that you were describing, Taylor, with people, banding together to get what they want. And that could go one of two ways. I mean, it could be extremely chaotic and very fiery, very aggressive. But if there's a little bit of strategy that's added to that, it's probably going to be okay. So, and it's going to actually like help long term. So,
yeah. And I think it would probably be the beginning of a longer story that we'll see continued once the nodes move into Pisces and Virgo, which is really where you start to see collective action, unionization, and things like that. So this would really just be the start of it. But I want to say, first of all, Pisces, I think we have to remember it's the last sign of the zodiac. So it has this like, I have all of this experience that I'm collecting, right? And it is our time to dream, and it's our time to compost. It's our time to plant the seeds. So all of those Pisces placements that are in this eclipse, I think are our opportunity to dream and envision the world that we want, so that with the Aries energy, we can start something new.
If you're talking about the envisioning, so for instance, I'm just going to throw this up here. Right now on the screen, and for those listening, it's March 21st, 2024. And the reason I put this up is not only because Mars is the last degree of Aquarius, but it's to look at the Saturn-Venus conjunction that's happening there. And, remember, Saturn is reality. And it just brings a hyper-focused need for discipline and responsibility wherever it is. And it's doing this with Venus. Okay, so one could say this is a seed moment. Two, to help with some of the envisioning that Taylor's talking about when we're thinking about the Pisces story and all the transits that are happening with Pisces right now, and that will through all this is, we're dealing with relational stuff here. We're dealing with Venus and Pisces. So we're going back here from this is some couple days before the 25th eclipse, right? So there is some sort of solidification. There's a contract that is signed with Saturn here and Venus, and sometimes it's a hard one. The reality check, sometimes it's one that one is walking in full force in, like I'm down, we got this. Give some stability to this and this vision that we want to create and stuff. We can crystallize the vision with Saturn, So I just wanted to bring that up here because to go back to how we started talking about, we talked about the 25th, right? But these little things along the way, right here, right now, today, we saw a Venus in between Mars and Saturn, right? So here we are at this moment with Venus, Mars. And, eventually down the line, we'll talk about Mars, Saturn. But I like the envisioning technique, too, and all that, and making things reality. I don't know, Taylor, what's been on your mind. You're coming here with some fire here on this podcast. You're talking about unionization, getting together, all worked up. I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
I totally get it. Some of you who know me, some of the things I've talked about on my YouTube channel. About unionization and collective movements, and you've made promises with me on my channel, and those promises are committing to something on a deeper level that had to do with Pluto and Aquarius. But the smaller body planets, like when we deal with the smaller bodies, the ones that aren't the outer bodies like Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, these are the ones that are in front of us and that we deal with. And so when we have the smaller planets hit like Jupiter or Saturn, it's in our face and it's usable, or it's at least understandable. The outer body planets, in my opinion, a lot of times, they're always working their deal. And it's usually when the inner body planets are relating to them that it's on the stage and it's present, right? But on a long-term basis, how the outer body planets work. I'm a huge Saturn fan. Most people don't like the planet. So for me, am I looking at all this the next couple months and what's happening with Saturn, with Mars and Venus and everything? I'm all in. I'm all for it. Because a lot of times we get pissed about things. We're unhappy with things in our life, or we're inspired, or we dream, or they're interchangeable because our dream isn't becoming a reality. And so we get pissed. Mm-hmm. We're frustrated.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to bring in hypercapitalism and a bunch of other things like that. And you see the wars happening on the internet, with the mental war and everything else. But in general, if you look at it, if you do want your vision and dream to come true and to step towards it, you need Saturn. And it's not going to happen without it. And that, again, Saturn is going to bring the discipline, the regimen, the reality, the plan, and it's also going to get you up the mountain, really. And so if you can look at it that way and take it in as positively, some people Saturn just is not working for them, and it's always a beast in their life. It's on their shoulder, But with these eclipses and all through April and stuff, and even the rest of the year, to me, Saturn is kind of the secret planet in everything. So anyway, it's kind of funny how we ended up here with that.
It's like really big, be the change you wish to see in the world. Know that you incarnated and you have the power to be the change in the world, and that can spread to other people. Like, that's what Saturn and Venus together in Pisces is. It's pick up the Tao Te Ching and be that kind of leader. Be this spiritually based, compassionate, heart-centered leader, right? Give that to your CEO in the company and be like, how are you doing this? Are you embodying true leadership or not? Mm-hmm. And it is saying, I really want to break up from whatever this relationship is, but I'm not going to because I know I'm part of the problem. That's radical responsibility.
Yeah.
Seeing how you're part of the problem, not just the other person, and being like, well, we're done. That's not what it is. It's like, we can both do this. So I'm going to have to look inward. I'm going to have to get spiritual. I'm going to have to go into my heart. I'm going to have to go to therapy. I'm going to get some help for myself to realize why I feel so triggered right now, and then make a decision, because that's what the eclipse will invite us to do, is like, oh, I had enough. I'm going to break up with whatever this is. It's like, how about you stay and you figure it out and figure your own ish out, and then go back and make a decision what's best for you. The other thing that I haven't mentioned that I do want to mention, because I'm sure it will come up, is refugees. So I think that getting aid to refugees and seeing some sort of change in that situation could be positive change, would be the best outcome from some of this energy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And, just to circle back on Saturn a little bit, as a malefic, I know, Nicholas, you said that some people hate Saturn. They're scared of Saturn, or,
most clients, they can't deal.
Yeah. But, Saturn does have our highest and best interest. I always view Saturn as the 12th grade teacher. That teacher wants you to graduate. They really do, but they're not going to be easy on you. They're going to push you. They're going to test your limits. It's really being responsible as a leader, and in a way having no mercy, but having no mercy for the highest and best interest of who you're pushing or who you're taking care of, or even yourself. So yeah, it is funny how we ended up at Saturn, but should we start moving on to April 8th? Okay, sounds good.
Heck yeah.
So then we fast forward to April 8th, and if you haven't heard, there's a total solar eclipse, and it's happening in Aries at 19 degrees, and this is at 11:21 a.m. Pacific time. So, Nicholas, do you want to start it off?
If anyone's lucky enough to watch this, if you can, first of all, I can't believe I used the word lucky, because traditionally with that, with eclipses, that's not the word that comes up.
Yeah.
It's not lucky. But what I mean, quote unquote, is if you're going to fly somewhere and go catch this, you already got plans and you get to watch a total 100% solar eclipse, do it if you can. 2017 or whenever it was, I did it in Oregon. It just was mind blowing. I remember as a kid too, in Chicago. I watched one as a kid, but I know there's going to be a lot of hype, even not from the astrological space, but just in general, it cutting through most of the United States, and a lot of people are going to be traveling and gravitating towards watching it. So even if people aren't in astrology, they're in,
Yeah.
they're in the ritual, they're going to do it. So, so saying that, it's huge for our country, for the United States. I'll say that, but you can look at this chart right now and go look at Saturn and Mars, and you see them together here, right? And the reason why I say that, I'm looking at that, is because this new moon in Aries is ruled by that Mars in Pisces. It's with Saturn. So a bit more, I think, a total reality check when it comes to like what we've been talking about, the three of us here setting up the relational story, whatever, it's in your personal life or it's politically, or it's in groups or the workspace. But there's a lot of, in my feeling here, a lot of caustic activity. And I'll be real with my opinion about this. I don't have the best feeling about this one. I just don't. And I, just because Mercury's retrograde in this chart, if we didn't have any other transit going on and it was just a retrograde situation, you're affected by it, just stuff happens, right? The email didn't go through, or no one heard what you said, or your brain's discombobulated. But it's definitely part of this eclipse. And so the expression that we talked about verbally that could happen on the 25th, and then we get to this place here like 2 weeks later, and while Mercury's retrograde, and all these Aries planets that you see in the chart in situations, Venus, the node, Moon, Sun, Chiron, and Mercury, ruled by Mars and Saturn, I don't take that as happy, and I take it as, in a sense, almost argumentative, and fire flying around. I also want to say that some of the perspective that I take with the North and South node is, I don't look at one as better than the other, and I don't take the look that some of modern astrology is taken, like you walk away from your South node and you go to the North node. I don't subscribe to that. I think on each end, they're both very powerful situations, and they both have their reasons. For me, from the studying I've done, I've been really influenced by the last 10 years, is the South node is a very spiritual place. And it has to do with a deeply innate spiritual quest and sense of something. And so when things happen in the South node, it's like a purging. You hear the dragon's tail. It's like you're pushing stuff out, or it's the tide getting pulled out. That kind of energy, it happens. So let's just say someone here has something at 15 degrees Libra. Something could be getting pulled out. The door is closing. They're in a situation, something's ending. But on a deeper spiritual level, this is happening for movement. It must happen. It must happen for someone to walk through the door in this story. So there is quality to that part of it, right? So on the other end of it, I am also subscribed to the thing of the North node being very much more present. And not that it's spiritual like the South node, but more on the North node part of it, it's much more obvious and raw, and it's dealing with the material world. So that's the head of the dragon. It's consuming, and it's just going, and just wants to keep going. And so you could see both sides of this can be funky. It's not like, oh, South node, that's the hard part, and the North node is this. It's on both sides, and you have to make the judgment in your life or in situations to see how that's flowing. Do you all consume on the North node Aries part here with Mercury being retrograde? Do you say what you have to say? My opinion is everything. I need to put my will into the world and my opinion into the world. Yes, go for it, but know that there's consequences from it. Know that you're going to have to deal with byproduct. That's just an example. But a lot of times we could see and touch that with the North node because we're formulating it in the real world. And on the other end is, again, let's reiterate this, it's more of a spiritual thing here, what that South node is representing. So again, I don't take a bad, this is good and the South node is bad and blah, blah, blah. I think you get the picture here. And I just wanted to make sure I said that on this podcast because there's other people going to have opinions about North and South node. The evolutionary astrology way, which I know, I'm not trying to diss on that, but I think more of my experience with clients and seeing eclipses, what happen, how you can look at things. you have a tendency to be very binary in solution making. Walk away from the south, go to the north, or the other way around. And for me, I'm like looking at both, and I'm seeing in general, in the end, they are opposing each other. And as with any opposition, you want to try to find the meeting place. So can the North Node in this eclipse that's ruled by Mars somehow find a connection to a South Node again that's ruled by Venus, the typical longest story in human history, which is a Mars-Venus story, right? Sometimes you're getting it on, and sometimes you're after each other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
100%.
So, okay, so I went on a long-winded thing there, but those were some of my thoughts that I had in the shower this week. So that's where it happens. That's where this just stuff happens. I don't have any water in my chart, and I actually think when I'm taking showers and I beat my water, I go to a lake or I go to a river, I have these downloads that are wild because I only have one piece of water in my chart. It's Jupiter and Scorpio, and it's enough, trust me. But anyway.
That is enough.
Yeah.
That'll do it. That's
enough.
it right there.
Anyway, I kind of threw a lot out there here with this. So,
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I think you bring up a lot of good points.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think in the astrological community, what you just talked about probably is what we're going to be talking about between now and then and afterwards, which is evolutionary astrology and the nodes and fate and karma. It's already coming up. Stephen Forrest had an article in the NCGR magazine that just came out that I saw where he was talking about karma and the nodes and the evolutionary astrology perspective. And people are having really big opinions on it because it can be hurtful to people and not really helpful. And astrology is here to be helpful to people, not be hurtful to people. So people are going to have strong opinions on either side. Aries, Libra, right?
yeah.
My personal opinion is that you use the best part of the South Node to help you get towards the North Node and do your North Node. So how do we use our relationships with other people? The fact that we are inherently social creatures. When you come out of the womb, the only thing you can do is cry in order to get fed, right? You can't walk like animals can walk. You can't go feed yourself. We need each other, right? So that's, I think, how we can use the South Node in Libra to then become ourselves, to be attached in a secure way, to be unique individuals and be ourselves. I'm a little conflicted, though, because it's like just about the eclipse in general, because I'm thinking, first of all, Chiron is like to
huge.
the minute
Yeah.
right there. And I'm like, okay, so if you have the sun on the North Node, if you have anything on the North Node, it's like making something bigger. So you could see burnout, you could see fires, you could see road rage. This is all Judith Hill, eclipses, lunar nodes, her interpretations, like very literal. So things getting very hot, overheating, the weather being very hot, needing to drink a lot of water. But it's a new moon where we don't have sun and the sun is actually being eclipsed. So it's like the opposite of that, right? The moon on the North Node would be like big emotions, big feelings, but it's a new moon. It's not a full moon. It's the opposite of that. Chiron is debt jubilees. Actually, we're having a Chiron return for the United States, and it's an opportunity for a debt jubilee. But again, it's a new moon, so it's not a big energy for debt relief. It's actually potentially the opposite, like a Saturn, Mars signing into law that we're never going to forgive anyone's debt, which would piss a lot of people off, right? So maybe then we
Especially
do get
when they
that
were-
fire of like, you better forgive our debt.
When they were promised in one sense, right?
Yeah.
One person can't do that. The president can't do that, but they were promised. So that it really hyped it up. So anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Those are all valid points. I feel like we could do a whole episode and more on this. It's quite a bit, but just to circle back to what you said, Nicholas, in the beginning, you just said, it's going to be fiery. There's going to be I think you said fire flying or fire in the air.
Yeah, in a sense of communication and different ways
exactly.
of pushing. Yeah.
Yes. So, just like being able to make sure that we're using, integrity during this time, but I just think it's going to be a little bit much. There's a lot that has happened with the Aries and Libra eclipses in the past, and it's not all amazing. I'm just going to say that. I don't really want to go into the whole history unless you guys do, but there's a lot of upheaval, I'll say, and a lot of turmoil that has come up. So also, yeah, we'll skip that one. Yeah, just, I think April it's going to be really up and down, like with these eclipses, and then also the Jupiter Uranus conjunction. So the energy is just kind of like all over the place. But anything else on this eclipse that you guys want to talk about?
Yeah. If everyone in here can imagine that there is a replica of you or a part of you that's sitting next to you right now or behind you or with you. And that person is wounded. And right now, as I said that, and you're all here, you're doing this, you're recognizing that person, know that they've been there the whole time. Let's say since you entered in the universe. And so saying that right now, that person is there and you're looking at them and you see the hurt, the suffering, and the wounds. And you're present and you take that in. And you recognize and you're confirming that acknowledgement and that action is a potion that you can slowly drink that is healing and the first step towards a longer road of understanding that other person you're staring at and slowly integrate that other person. You bond and you merge. That is a Chiron story. That is pretty much the center point of this eclipse. Honestly, if we just take it on a personal level, we're not talking about anybody else. We're talking about me, you. We're going to take the Aries perspective. We're looking in the mirror of that person next to you. And that takes courage to stand in those places, to do it again, to remember that person, to come back to them 2 days later or whatever, or they're with you. And then once you see it, you can never let it go. They're around now and you have to deal. But the bringing together and the reintegration of that part of you, that's the center point of this eclipse for me. So you see here on the screen, on those listening, Taylor mentioned Partal exactly conjunct this new moon. Some will use that Mercury in Aries retrograde to scream out loud, to scream their wound out loud, because they haven't had a chance to, or they just discovered it, they just found it, they just integrated, they just acknowledged. They're in a relational situation outside themselves where the situation in the story was suppressing that, or they were sacrificing and weren't putting themselves first. because of whatever they were taught in relationships of what to do when it comes to like making sure everything's okay. Thing we love about Aries is the raw impulsive actions that Aries takes to put oneself in the world, to test oneself. It's why Mars rules it, the god of war. It actually wants blood and sweat and rambunctiousness and to get bruised. That thing. Other times that sucks. But if you take the perspective of like, I'm walking wounded, this is who I am, I profess, this is what I carry is my wound. I've been silent way too long, about it to myself. And let's say you're in some situation where it is with other people, and you speak your truth. Is it tough? Yes. Is it Mercury's retrograde? Yes. It's not perfect. The cool thing about Mercury retrograde is you can come back and correct, right? But initially, it's not to almost think and weigh out like a Libra would. Bless the Libras for doing that. But if we're taking everything into consideration, where Mercury is and where Chiron is, completely risk it all. Completely sword and shield yourself through it. Again, I'm talking generally here. One has to gauge the situations that they're in, especially if it's your first kind of connection with your wounded self. And then you're going to put it out there. You got to have some tools. Those tools are sword and shield, quote unquote. But whatever the tools you need that are benefiting yourself, you're putting yourself first. Those types of things as part of the eclipse. This is how I looked at it. I'm looking at it. I could say this, someone's going through a Chiron return in Aries too. So, I have my own interesting bias to all of this. But, a lot of times I just know this in our client work, and I know you, Lisa and Taylor, we do it, and those of you who are listening who deal with charts, a lot of times people know what they want. They actually do. They're just afraid. Because if they were to go for what they wanted, this person might not like it. They're not going to understand. I don't know how. It's tough, basic life situations. But if you can capture the fire, and if you can connect with that wounded part of yourself and get a little riled up about it, it's your human right to put yourself in the world the way you want to be, what you want to do, especially these days. It's so much influence on what we're supposed to do or how we're supposed to do it, whether you're staring at TikTok or it's the way you grew up in some family structure or the relationships you somehow repetitively have picked. But somehow you get the call and you know this thing. Like, why did I do that again? I knew. Again, you're looking at that other person next to you and you corral them in. You bring them in with a big embrace, and you put it in bond with that situation. And then there you can strategize. There you can wield your sword metaphorically, in the world. And that's how warriors are made. And that's how you do your quest, and saying that, you can use Mars and Saturn in this chart to really solidify core energy, Mars and Saturn. And you can build anything with Mars and Saturn. When you get it together, those are the most two solid things. When you get them together, you can build anything that you want. So if you take that outlook, start with how I did this, how I said this, this is a great way to look at it. Is it going to happen on that day? No. Do I advise you to take the biggest risk on the eclipse day or to make some astrological talisman? No. Can you chill? But if you're in this situation, like a lot of people will be, not just on this day, but in the eclipse season, where you're in forced situations, there's no way out, right? There's no way out of it. And you have to make some decisions. You have to do things. Know that Mercury's going to be retrograde. No Chiron's involved in this. Mars, Saturn. And so you got to take that into account and then be real smart about it. if you can. And others on the outside of you, they might be representing the more uncontrollable aspects, or they might be actually mirroring the wounded part of you that you see, and they're coming at you, and they're wearing that costume, and you're like, I see that, and like you'll have to deal. And that is like how the relational Aries Libra situation can play out with other things. But no, it's really starting off with looking next to you, like I started talking about. So
I'm going to be the Libra to your Aries right now.
Yes,
okay? So I love everything that you were saying, and I can totally see that perspective. And people here are more, like, what's the word? Evolved, right? Like mature, responsible folks. There's going to be some folks who are not evolved and are not mature and are not responsible, who feel all the ways that you just described. And what can they do in the United States? Some really bad shit. They can do some really bad, really dangerous shit. Not to be like a scary, like trying to make people scared, but I probably won't go in crowds that day. I probably won't go to a supermarket. I probably won't be places in public where people can carry whatever they want to carry that could cause violence, because that unevolved person, I can't imagine we're not going to hear a story of gun violence on that day.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I wouldn't doubt. Yeah.
But I had a dear friend of mine who did the practice that you're talking about, but it was, there's the person next to you and there's the person across from you, because the person across from you has that person next to them too. And this is your higher self. So then take your two higher selves and elevate them and have them have a conversation in your favorite place where you can be nothing but happy. And nothing but love can be passed between you. And I think that is an opportunity that we have as well. So that's my Libra to your Aries, is why don't we take ourselves, our higher selves, to this conversation of, can we heal together?
Yeah.
Can we find love?
I obviously,
Yeah.
Taylor, I'm glad you said that, because, and that's not like some outlandish, idealistic something. It can seem that way because of what we're bombarded with, but I mean, if you don't have what you're talking about, if you don't have that way of integrating too, where you're honest in relationships, or honest in a relational situation about what you need and what it needs to be, but that you can't do it alone in the end, and you have to integrate, that takes some tools and some understanding. And I say that because of, like, for those you say they're unevolved or might not be quite there, is it a lot of intense activity around there? Yeah, I would chill. You have to gauge that for yourself. But on the bigger picture, like you're talking about, listen, I'm as cynical as they come, but I'm into what you're saying. I want that too, and that's a long road. Mm-hmm. That's a long road, but situations and gateways like this could, evolves and can, let's say 6 months later, when we're having eclipses again during an election season. Okay. But forget about the actual election. Let's just say within your own world and your own community, to take what you talked about, Taylor, that way of like, can we relate? But here's what I feel and what I need on the table. And you're saying the same things. And I have my little separated self, and you do too. And it can be an understanding and a way of doing something. And from a longer picture of wanting change in community, in your groups, or in society or politics, it takes actually this situation that we're in now. We're face to face in person, and we're having the conversation. So it just starts there, right? Is it going to get heavy? Is it going to be, there's going to be disagreements? Yes, but can you take the higher road, right? And I'm all for it, Taylor. I trust me, I want it to.
Absolutely.
So.
Definitely. And I think the point is, people who are evolved and, if you consider yourself evolved, really stepping forward and, like you said, Taylor, being the change that you want to see in the world, leading with the values that you really want to see in the world, and also inspiring people who may not be as evolved as you, encouraging, normalizing like independence in relationships, therapy, things that are really important to help us to get through this, and to own our individuality, and to step fully into our individuality and be proud of it in order to merge with the other, because that's Aries Libra, right? It is, being strong enough to be in our own skin in order to merge with the other person And that's that mirroring that both of you guys were talking about a little bit too. So yeah, both beautiful. Yeah, I see both sides. Dropped the mic for both. So, yeah. So, okay, what else would you guys like to talk about with the eclipses? Anything else? I feel like that was a good amount and that was a lot. I think for our listeners and for people in the audience, just remember what I said, what Nicholas said. I believe Taylor said this too. These are life transforming portals. This is not like something that is going to happen right on the eclipse. And this is a season of divine intervention, like we said, and it's partnering with the universe to move forward and make these changes, and sometimes surrendering in order to make room to bring in the new. Again, it could be a course correction, and it's just really important season. So anything else you want to touch upon?
I have eclipse glasses down there. I'm ready.
Yeah.
Not there was one that's going to happen here tomorrow, but but I just, again, know that these are longer cycle that you're talking about. With 6 months later, we're dealing with eclipses again, and we start to have the overlap happen with some of the eclipses that start in Pisces, Virgo. So, you look back to 6 months ago, if you were feeling, if this eclipse story, let's say you're a Libra rising, Aries rising, know that 6 months ago, there's a connection, and it goes all the way back to, last spring when we had the new moon in Aries, 29-degree lunation that happened. So, if you're looking to track and to understanding your chart is connected to stuff like this, do an eclipse work like from the astrological view of looking back and forward, and even looking back 9 years ago or 18 and a half years ago, by the way, when this last was around here, because let's just say it for the tape. What did I have here? I had, it was on the same date, April 8th, 2005 is connected to this eclipse here. 19 degrees, and you can go all the way back to April 9th, 1986. I do this with clients all the time when they have eclipses affect their chart, especially 1 or 2 degrees off a major placement in their chart. I start to go back and I give them homework and like, what was going on back then? And a lot of times a client can catch a story, catch the thread, and so they have a little bit more understanding.
That's so important. And, if like for the astrologers out there, anyone that goes to an astrologer, I think that's really important to track the dates. I mean, even as a society, like looking at dates, like April 26th, 1986 was a really important day. We're not going to talk about it so much, but, just really making those correlations and connections with the chart.
I think the last thing I would say is just that the dwarf planet Ceres is square the nodes and the eclipse in April. So that's about nurturing ourselves, mothering ourselves, feeding ourselves, going back to Mother Earth, and really bringing in that divine feminine, and that Mars and Venus are in mutual reception. So there is some positive energy of using that Mars-Venus creativity and taking action in beautiful ways, and women's rights coming up as well. So
yeah. Beautiful. All right. So we're going to go ahead and start to move into the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus. Want to start us off, Nicholas?
Sure.
Cool.
Okay, so let me pull this up here. But while I do this, I just for definition, technical version of like how when a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction happens, it's pretty much every 13, 14 years. So let's just kind of get that of understanding a cycle, a beginning and an end. Because that's what conjunctions are in a sense. There's when we are applying to a conjunction, it's ending, and then we're beginning a cycle. So as I pull this up, God, it's just enough with eclipses. Then we got to deal with Jupiter-Uranus.
And can I add something to that?
Sure.
I do believe this is the only time this is going to happen in Taurus in all of our lifetimes, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it should be, because usually in these cycles, there's maybe once or twice or 2-3 hits, a conjunction hits because of a retrograde in the cycle, but they're not. It's not happening here. So Okay, let's. I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna throw it out the audience here. Picture where Taurus is in your chart if you know it. By the way, a lot's probably happened there since 2018, especially if you're Taurus. You got planets there. You're Scorpio too. You got Scorpio. So you know a lot of action's been happening there, and with the eclipses and Uranus being there, but there's even more. It's not stopping here. But Jupiter's kind of come in here since May of last year to be in Taurus. Know that Jupiter keywords are, in a sense, there's opportunity here, but there's a question in a vision involved. And with Uranus, we're dealing with a planet that likes to crack things open and break off. For one word to use is in a freedom sense of wanting something new and to liberate wherever it's touching, right? So if we take the keywords of like, and there's more keywords to this, because I know you two are going to help me on this, but the quest, we take a liberating quest in the Taurus part of your chart is one way you can look at this, of this conjunction happening, that there's something ending here, but there's something being set off here in a longer story. And the word that comes into my mind is renewal here with Jupiter Uranus. And I'll stop there. I'll chime in again here, but I just thought I'd set it up.
Love it. I think innovation is like the big keyword most people would think of first, but I'll just read something that I wrote for the Astrology Hub a while back when they asked me about how to advice on is understanding and leveraging the energies of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in 2024. So I said, spontaneous generosity in the simplest, most foundational ways. That was my main advice. Recognizing the divine abundance within and surrounding us. Being generous with our gifts, talents, resources, food, land, and housing. Finding inspiration, pleasure, healing, and even divine ecstasy in the simple truth of being alive in this magical world. Using these simple things to inspire others for learning, abundance, generosity, healing, and our highest and greatest good is the highest vibration of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus.
Beautiful. Yeah, that was really good. You said the divine ecstasy
in the
of
simple
being
truth
alive.
of being alive.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect for Taurus and that, Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And, also just like having those aha moments, of course, with Jupiter, growth, expansion. Sometimes there's surprises. There's also like progress within our community, within our collective that's really going to happen. So those are all some keywords also that go along with that.
And don't eat weird alien food that these labs are making, I would say, is Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Yeah.
And you're saying that because of Taurus dealing with food and creation of food and the earth and stuff. Yeah.
And chemicals and pesticides and BS like that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because if we're looking at past Jupiter-Uranus conjunctions, there's usually a lot of breakthroughs that come through in the area what sign it's doing. So we can kind of look to see there could be some breakthroughs that dealing with food production in a positive way, right? Dealing with the crisis that we have on Earth, dealing with what we've done to the planet. So I'm looking at it hopefully here that this is kind of starts a cycle and some innovation that comes in with dealing with how we grow food, how we make food, how we distribute it, the cost and the worth of the transactional activity with it. And the breakthrough, and by the way, what was the ecstasy? Can you say that again?
I said, finding inspiration, pleasure, healing, and even divine ecstasy in the simple truth of being alive in this magical world.
Yes, and that's very Venetian, Venus ruling Taurus in the way of looking and living through Taurus.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's kind of the flavor of why you wrote that. And it's interesting for me, we were talking about innovation and breakthroughs, whether it's in food production or in resources that we handle and create, Taurus involvement things. But I am of the mindset, since Uranus went into Taurus of 2018, that I think that the innovation and the revolution of Uranus, actually, there is new stuff that will come in, but I actually think that it goes back to something that has always been there. And you all know who watch me and stuff will listen. I talk about living through your senses all the time. I'm all about it more than ever, considering the way we live our life and what has happened with the rapidness of life and technology. Mind you, amazing benefits, right? There's people going to be able to watch this on YouTube later, okay? And I'm on YouTube, and I'm making my living off YouTube. My life is changing because of YouTube. But I have to know when to get off the computer. And I have to know when to go to water and get my downloads. And many of us, we just so happen to have a pandemic happen where we were internalized and we needed technology and we were connecting that way, but then your lower lumbar is gone now from sitting at the seat and you're hunched over, right? And it's like, people are going back to like, I just need to go meet people face to face. I just need to go outside. I just need to breathe. I need my, and whether they know it or not, I'm talking about their senses being engaged. So if I, for me personally, if I think about the innovation and breakthroughs, the innovation and breakthrough is going back to being human, like going back to the senses. Now, the way your outlook could be different or whatever, but on a basic level, that actually might be the thing, and I think it is and will continue to be the farther we go along with certain transits here, where there is a rebellion towards technology. And there's a rebellion towards certain things that supposedly make our life easier. And that beyond AI and all those things, the benefits of that we want something real and we want to be able to touch it. And we want to be able to be in this room. You all are watching me right now. Can you hear me? On the podcast, you can hear my voice. Everybody in this room right now, my voice isn't amplified by the mic. You can hear my tone. You're looking at my body language right now. I'm smiling for those on the podcast. And we are doing a ritual. It's not the ritual 20%, or it was on Monday. It's our life is a ritual. And what we are doing here, face to face and listening to each other, you're hearing my voice is coming through your eardrum. It's coming out of my voice box and it's vibrating this frequency and it's coming through and it's coming into your ears and it's creating the sound and you're taking it into your mind. And you can move it into your heart. And my voice, and the sound of my voice is me, Nicholas. It's my heart, my heartbeat. And it's going into your heart. That is a revolution, and that will always be that, I look at this from the organic point of view, and for Taylor brought up the ecstasy, the outlet, the vessel to ecstasy, the things that we do. When we're done, there's cupcakes over there. There's drink, there's oranges, satsumas. I got a salad waiting. Whatever, we would share food. We're going to sit down. You're going to sit with your friends next week when it's heavy, or later on this year when it's heavy, and you're going to be face to face and you're going to smell the food and you're going to share the drink, and there's going to be music in the background, and that is a ritual and that is magic, and that's what being human is. So for me, this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, we have the tools and the innovation and the breakthroughs that come on mass levels. We do. But on a personal level, know that you have it already. Now, when you're sharing with other people, you might be bringing in the newer types of resources and the way we do it, right? But we want to remember the five senses organic way of doing this. Lisa, you said something to me last night, not just the five senses. What did you say?
I was actually gonna talk about this. So I love what you're saying, Nicholas, because you are talking about the five senses, and that brings ecstasy to our human experience. And that is so beautiful. It's what we live for. It's why we're alive. To hear, to touch, to smell, to feel, all of those wonderful things. But we're also born with other senses that are a little more innate, and they are, to me, a little Neptunian, maybe, but they're also Uranian. And these senses are our clairvoyance, our clairaudience, our clairsentience, all of these senses that we have inside. It's that inner knowing. When you're in company with someone, you can feel their energy, their frequency, their vibration, like Nicholas said. So, that's what hits first. Energy just speaks louder than words. It always hits us first, right? We know when we can vibe with someone, we know when a place feels good to us, etc. And then we can start indulging in those five senses, and then it just feels like, orgasmic and like ecstasy, and it's beautiful. So,
Can I say something to what you just said?
Sure.
I'm just laughing right now because I can't believe we didn't mention this, right? And I'm going to put this chart up on the screen too, because it's kind of funny where we ended up. Taylor's kind of bringing some reality into this podcast too, right? Certain things which I'm grateful for, because usually I'm doing that. I'm a little bit more idealistic and wounded today. And then Lisa, you're talking about your thing, but you're looking at the chart up on the screen while we do this. We know tomorrow there is we're applying a Sun Neptune conjunction right now as we're doing this podcast, right? So we're kind of like, it's funny where we're ending up in these kind of like where you ended up here, where we're talking about orgasmic ecstasy. No, the water on the table isn't spiked with peyote. I kind of wish it was. But we're doing our form of that, right? But as a collective, if we're thinking as a whole, but when we're thinking too, to go back to Jupiter, Uranus, what it means for a collective, and we start small within ourselves and our community, and we go out. But I think what happens with our senses, and when we're relating each other in the garden, quote unquote, let's just call it that, what happens in those places of ecstasy and orgasm, of relating, and as we share the harvest and the resources that we created or the new ones, but what happens from those places, it doesn't just stop there. It does seep out, and it does go into the world and society. So I'm staying hopeful. I'm looking at this particular conjunction in that way. For the longer term, can it bring us this? Because are we on the brink? Sure feels that way. A lot of people are feeling that way. Everybody tight on money. Inflation. We see the brawling going on in different parts of the world. It's like, but we also have to remember that it's always been this way. So it sucks, but can we find the way? So how, do we do Jupiter and Uranus? How we look at it? But inherently, like what the both of you have said and have added about, there's more than five senses, whatever, but our integration with nature and what happens with nature, first of all, it's a reminder, nature. What's behind me? What's behind me? A plant here? We go outside, nature, the desert. You are not separated from that. You are nature. You are with it. It's completely honed in, integrated. A lot of what's happened is we feel separated, or we can feel separated from it. Right? So you gotta remember that, like our integration while we're sharing the senses and more beyond our five senses and our integration with nature, that's where innovation comes through, and that's where the breakthroughs come through. Really, is like, we're going to come out of here tonight. Hopefully some of you pick up something, you're inspired. For those of you listening, wherever you are, you feel something, and then you're going to ponder on it. You're going to let it simmer, and have a glass of some tea, and maybe it brings you somewhere else, right? And then the ideas come. We're exchanging something over the glass of wine, right? And so on and so forth. And we come there, and then that's where change comes. That's what we do, But I think a lot of times, and I'm kind of harping on this, but it's like it's like we forgot how to be with each other, even though we're constantly with each other online and in groups and all that. But we've kind of forgotten? So I just find this interesting that this is happening during a major political year. and to go off some of the things that Taylor was mentioning and the types of situations politically, you know?
Yeah.
So
Definitely. And I think that's so important what you said about nature and inspiration and, you know, bringing it back to an organic place too. I mean, think about you know, most of us live here in Tucson. I think all of us do. And imagine being out in the desert and just like going on a hike and putting your feet like on the dirt, and you know you're out by yourself and it feels so amazing and grounding and you're just feeling it, and that is when that inspiration comes through. So because we're talking about Taurus here, this earth sign, I think this kind of does go back to the more like primal, organic, humanistic parts of ourselves. So also I just want to say too, if like, because this is in Taurus, I think this is going to bring some definite change too, whether people like it or not. So if you are like a fixed person, if you have a fixed signature, or you have a lot of fixed in your chart, you know, just get a little loose, be ready for that, because, you know, sometimes it's not easy if you have a lot of fixed and you don't want to change, you don't want to go with the flow, but like just start getting the movement going here.
yeah, just to say for the audio, the conjunction happens at 21 degrees in Taurus. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about Venus, and you know, Venus does conjoin Uranus here like less than a month later. I believe it's May 18th. So, yeah, there's that too.
And Jupiter will be in Gemini by then.
Yes, exactly.
I hope everyone like feels really encouraged and psyched
Big energy.
for. I mean, honestly, the next how many days we're at this? This is a month. We got 2 eclipses, a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. We haven't talked about like all the other minor aspects that happen. I mean, we got major conjunctions that are happening this whole time. It's a lot of activity. I mean, there's always something going on in astrology, but the next 45 days, it's so concentrated and so much movement that every day is an aspect. Every day is a chapter. So you got to remember, like, you know, if you're one who can handle it, and you're watching this, cool. But remember, you take a break, okay? It's just like, I have to tell myself, if an astrologer can ever take a break from looking at the calendar, it's like, you know, I take a break from looking at the ephemeris calendar for 2 days. I have a major guilt thing that happens. Where's the moon? I'm like, I should know where the moon is. But at the same time, you know, it's just to remember that in these portals of change, and these things are coming, one door is closing and another one's opening, and then you got an electrifying conjunction in Jupiter, Neptune, and there's this movement, and everything else we've talked about, our personal lives, the political lives, is to remember, you know, to take a break. You know, you don't have to do something with every transit, and just listen to what your senses are telling you.
For sure. And that's such an important thing to remember, just because if you're a person who does follow social media, like Instagram, TikTok, there's always something, right? Like we see something every hour about a certain transit or, you know, whatever. And it's like, okay, now this, now that, now this, now that. So, you know, that's kind of why we're talking about the eclipses and Jupiter conjunct Uranus and Taurus today, because those are the biggies. And they kind of inform, or the aspects, I don't know, I guess these big ones kind of inform everything else. So,
can I say something, Lisa?
Yeah,
I didn't mean to
sure.
interrupt you.
No, go
people
ahead.
looking at this chart up right now, I want you to go take a look at where Venus is in Aries. What number is over there? Say it out loud. 19. Where do we see 19 in this conversation in Aries?
Mm-hmm.
That's the April 8th eclipse degree where Chiron is. So I just want to point this out, that even on this day here, it's right after the April 8th eclipse. Every day there's these fascinating aspects with Mercury, and then you see with Venus rolling over the eclipse degree the day we do the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. It's just, you can see how storied, how beautiful it all is. And I hope it feels beautiful at those times for you. But, you know, I wanted to make a point of that, you know, and then you see at the same time what Venus is doing with Chiron. So, you know, I'm just trying to put it together because they're not separate. right?
Right.
And Venus rules this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus. Just we have to say that out loud, okay? I just want to make sure. I'm always saying that. I always say for the tape, what generation I am from. Like, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. So anything else regarding Jupiter conjunct Uranus and Taurus? Taylor. Okay. Anything from you, Nicholas?
Taylor, when it comes time to get up on the streets and do something, it's you. I wanna walk side by side with you. Lisa's coming with us.
Somebody start something. I don't know.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forget what it's called, but there's the General Strike US. If you want to follow them on Instagram and online and learn more, I think it's generalstrikeus.com. If that's something that you're interested in supporting, there's lots of ways to support and learn more about the movement. So.
It's interesting you mentioned that because Sean Fain, the head of the UAW, some of you know that when I was on the Astrology Podcast with Chris and Austin, we talked about some of the transits that were happening in the early 1900s in Detroit. And Sean now, general strikes are usually the tradition to happen on May Day, but they have this like 2-year plan. They're going big. Like UAW's leading it, but if you're noticing whatever happens with unions in the elections this year, I think it's going to be harder before it gets better. But they're really projecting out the next 2 years to do a type of
Pisces and Virgo. It's an eclipse.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's a great. You just gave me I got to research something now. But know that's she's referencing the general strike, and he. Anybody listening out there, by the way, later on, could somehow give me Sean Fain's birth time. I've been looking for his birth time. Can't find it, head of the UAW. But that's the projected plan is to do this mass general strike. And we're talking about shutting everything down.
So get your money right with this conjunction is saying all of this is saying get your money right. Get it in order so that when the time comes, you yourself can walk away, or you can support people who need to walk away, who are living paycheck to paycheck on the income.
It's very,
that's what it's about.
Taylor, very interesting what you're saying, because we're dealing with that, but we're also dealing with Pluto and Aquarius too here. And a longer story here of what happens and when people do things in a new way, a proactive way together in bigger masses or in smaller parts of the community. We're also dealing with economics here in the end with a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, because we're dealing with Taurus and resources here. So, to stay on the spirit, Taylor's spirit here, these eclipses, the fight for equality, economic justice, this is not going away. And a lot of us, I'll be real with you. I have a past, activist past in Seattle since the 90s, and I spent my time doing a lot of stuff, major WTO, Occupy Seattle for 7 months of my life, and other things. And I took a break, and because you have to, or else you can't do it anymore. But as I get older, you're seeing the energy in the younger, the rebelliousness, and people are unhappy, and it gets to a certain point where there's no choice. So we think about it economically, sticking to the transits. Is regardless of party, I think eventually the commonality that most people have are economics. If the price of gas is $4.25, that means so and so Trump supporters paying $4.25, and I'm paying $4.25. If the eggs are this amount of money, that means everybody else is paying that. So for me, if I look at this from where we're going and stuff, to bring it around. Can people at opposite sides, politically or whatever it is, can they relate? Can they find a way across the table, right? And it could happen, and I think it is going to happen when it deals with money and economics, really, right? That kind of leaks past the rhetoric. It's like, hey, I'm never going to believe in what you're going to believe in. As a matter of fact, some of the legislation you're passing, I think, is like back in the dark ages. But at the same time, can you talk to somebody opposite end, and what language do you use, and how do you connect? And it's economics. It's where the food is coming from, the cost of food, how we share it, that's what we share, And so if anyone's looking for a way, to do a general strike and it happens, listen, I was in Occupy Seattle on the ground. I was sitting there at that point with a bunch of libertarians, all anarchists, You had socialists, democratic socialists before it became that. You had everybody, military people, Republicans, and they were all there because it all started in New York, the anarchist action, by the way. Let's just be real. They started because it was Wall Street, right? So if you think about this and what's happened has transpired, then there's been a lot more separation. But the reasons why Trump has this popularity, or other people do, but inherently you always talk about, the government or this and that. Now, is it all true? Not really, but all the sides are unhappy with the structure itself, really, right? And what has happened. And we know the United States is a reckoning place, and it's having its Pluto return in these elections. And once Uranus goes into Gemini, the last time I had Uranus Gemini stuff, it's tied into some heavy stuff, Civil War. I mean, no joke with our country. Yeah. So for me, I mean, looking at this, like my brain's going, as you can tell, it's like, where can you find the connection? And it's usually through economics, and what's the word? Through labor, through labor. And listen, you got a family. I don't agree with you. I got a family. We just want to have everyone fed, right? And you could pay the rent. And so, I'm trying to find a beacon, a beacon in the madness of that. But yeah.
Yeah, and that's a big part of the Pluto and Aquarius story, right? So I think what you said earlier, though, it's probably going to, well, not probably, we're going to see things get a little tougher, get a little harder before they actually start to get better. And we're in it right now. We are literally in it right now. And what you said, like, there's inflation, money is tight, but there's also a lot that we can do for ourselves as individuals to like facilitate this change and start to encourage this change. That's part of the eclipses too.
I agree with you, Lisa. Thank you for being the center.
I just tied it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to the last part of the show. It's astrology books. So we're going to just take it and take the topic and get a little bit lighter here. So
yeah, you're going to go broke now.
Yeah,
like,
now
we're talking about astrology
broke.
books. Now we're going to go anyway.
Totally. So we're at the end of the show before the Q&A, but we did want to talk about astrology books because we are all collectors here and we're all huge fans of astrology books. So, one book that I brought up here, that because we're in eclipse season, I highly recommend this one. If you haven't read it yet, it's Interpreting the Eclipses by Robert Karl Jansky. And I believe, actually, Sarah, you and I were reading this together, and this is a great book. It really just breaks down what eclipses are, how they happen. It breaks it down by sign, and it talks about some really interesting points that I actually didn't know about. So this is a good one. This is old school, and yeah.
Great astrologer.
Yeah.
Jansky. He's got a medical book, and of course, there's a lot of people, old school people in astrology, are very influenced by Jansky's work. So
definitely.
Yep. I can go off on books here, Taylor.
Well, I'll be quick then. I just have two.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Or 3 books. So Eclipses in You, How to Align with Life's Hidden Tides by Judith Hill, and then Lunar Nodes by Judith Hill, and Prenatal Eclipses by Rose Lineman, which Sarah also has influenced me in. And I think that's really good. And a non-astrology book that is one of my favorites is Wayne Dyer, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, The Wisdom of the Tao.
Yep.
Listen to it too. I think hearing his Taurus voice is very nice.
Ooh.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Nice.
Judith's book is the yellow book called The Lunar Nodes. That's a really good book. The first part of that book is taken from classes that she's taught, and then it's cookbook and most the rest of the book, but not long-winded. So like it'll have like, when Mars is conjunct your North Node, and she's keywords in a paragraph. It's a great book. I reference it all the time. Glad you mentioned the book. Yeah. And it's got a yellow cover. It's a big workbook kind of thing. And Judith is out of Portland. She's amazing astrologer. She's actually, sorry, I got to say this. She's speaking tomorrow for ESAR, for our star clubs. on medical astrology. She's an amazing medical astrologer. She's got books on one on astrological body types, where she's like hand drawn, like Taurus rising nose and face and all that. But she's got a plethora. Her brain is amazing. She's Pisces. I don't know if she's Mercury in Pisces, but she's got a huge catalog of books, and they're all very interesting. Even one that's a nonfiction book, kind of an astrology-based way. So, yeah, totally recommend Judith. And she knows her medical astrology in these fascinating ways. Up on the screen here, there's a book, an eclipse book. It's called Lunar Shadows 3. Like there's been 2 other ones, but there hasn't, by Dietrich Pessin. I think this person's still alive, and they used to do a radio show. This particular book is pretty dense, and this person uses solar fire, but the way they interpret it and how they deal with cycles of eclipses is so right on in this book. It also has tables in the back. Now we're pulling stuff up on programs, but a full featured book, it'll take you forever. It's just one of these books you can constantly pull off the shelf when it comes to eclipses. I'm influenced by some more Eastern and Vedic texts the last 5 to 10 years slowly when dealing with the nodes. Some of that I talked about tonight. So if you're into that, that's a whole nother world. But Freedom Cole's a very popular Western Vedic astrologer who's got 2 books called Cycles of Life, I think, volume 1 and 2. And something else is going to pop in my mind when it comes to that. So, but we could keep going on this.
Yeah.
On books. I'm curious. Someone just say something out loud. What's the first book that you ran into? Grant Louis, Astrology for the Millions. That's right. And Grant wrote several books, and those books were bestsellers at the time. And a lot of people in the astrology world, certain generations, let's say Pluto and Leos, are hugely influenced by Grant. Grant has a book that's like a poetry book, if you can find this, on each side. And Rick Levine turned me on to this book. It's an amazing book. But you have it at home? Someone here in the audience is talking about, they mentioned Grant, and they have this book at home. I wish I can remember the name of the book, but Astrology for the Millions was a book that hit the masses for the time and generation of what it was. And for me, we were talking last night, Lisa, and you have it in the cabinet where Taylor's sitting behind you, was obviously Linda Goodman's Sun Signs book. And, that was the first book that came to me where I was like, oh, wow, and she was such a good writer.
Yeah.
And then her Love Signs book was huge. Her story is wild. I don't know if you know her story. I won't get into it, but it's pretty sad in the end. But there needs to be a documentary on her. But the reason why I asked somebody in the audience was about books is because I think there's certain books out there that even more learned astrologers might even say that's not real astrology, or might criticize it or whatever. Well, Grant knew his stuff, but some people might not like the modern view of certain books, but there are gateways, and I think here we're in a golden age of astrology books, whether we're bringing them back or the authors and people writing. There's so many books out there.
Yeah.
You got to remember, somebody walking through a Barnes & Noble or a Mass book they don't know, and they're in the middle of Nebraska, and there's they're in some dry county or something, and they're it's completely, the county's run just religiously, and they're secretly, they want to be a witch or something, and they got to seek out the books, and then they're going to go to the only place they can go, Barnes & Noble. So these Mass books, even though I'm not fully into them, they do reel people in. And so, I'm all for it, right? Obviously, if it's done with some basis and education behind it, right?
For sure.
But there's a lot of levels of those beginner books through generations, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, there's just something beautiful about a book, in my opinion, and that kind of circles back to that Taurus energy we were talking about earlier. But holding a book, smelling the book, I mean, it's magical. And also vintage astrology books are definitely one of my favorites. So being able to like flip through and find an old chart, like if you, after the podcast, if you want to look through these cases, these are my personal collection, not all of it, just like a taste. But, if you look through some of them, there's a lot of notes. I even found like photo booth pictures of someone who owned the book. There's all kinds of stuff. So check them out. And yeah, they're amazing. I think TAG, Tucson Astrologers Guild, has a really wonderful collection of books too, if you want to pick some up. I also have them for sale here as well. So yeah.
There's a book on back there. There's a bunch, but there's a particular book back there. I hope it's not here when we're done. It's one of my favorite books. It's called The Astrology of Fate by Liz Green. It's in the back. It's a secret little book. She's a psychological astrologer. Thank you for holding that up. If you're into Pluto, there's a whole thing in there in a different way because she's dealing with myth and archetypes. All of her stuff is good. Her Saturn book's incredible. Her Neptune book's a trip. It's Neptune. It's like can't read it straight through. But that book in particular, here on the screen, there's some books there, and I'll show you. Like if you're a type of person who's jumping in, there's a book that is up there called On the Heavenly Spheres. So we're dealing with a more traditional way of learning astrology that was done by 2 Portuguese astrologers. For those listening and are here in the future, if you're learning astrology, I more than suggest that you learn traditional rulership schemes and understand astrology from a more traditional space. Then you could do whatever the hell you want with it afterwards. If you want to use Uranus as the ruler of Aquarius and stuff like that. But I think one should learn the traditional scheme and program in their head and then do what they want. For a book to give to somebody that is learning astrology, I actually like Chani's book up there. It's called You Were Born for This. She's got an audio version, by the way, that's really good. But this book, she's heavily influenced by Demetra George, and the basic concepts of learning what each sign and stuff is just really well done. Like the way she's just an amazing writer, as we all know. But You Were Born for This, Astrology for Radical Self-Acceptance. Obviously, it's written for our current times. But it does a really good job. It doesn't feel pop astrology-ish. Like it has depth to it, but enough where if someone didn't know, they can start the quest, right? So I totally respect her. I think it's one of the best things she's ever done. And it has some really cool stuff in the back of the book to help the user like plot out stuff, like workbook-ish type. Another book on the screen here is... you see Secret Language of Astrology by Roy Gillette, astrologer out of the UK for beginners to come in. It's very visual. This other one right here, Astrology Using the Wisdom of the Stars in Your Everyday Life. This is a great beginner's book too for those. If you start to jump in and get further, we can keep going. Obviously, Chris Brennan has his major book. Demetra has her 2 books. But if you have to be committed to those books. That's a commitment, right? I could keep going here. What type of stuff
Your
here?
Gemini can
Yeah.
go for ages.
You caught
So
that?
think
You
so.
caught that? I flew all the way up here. I'm letting it loose. So you could see, right here, I got some of Judith Hill's books on the screen. Her medical astrology book is really, all of them are good. I could keep going. Here's Jansky's book, by the way, on the screen. Here's another one, if you could find it, Astrology, Nutrition, and Health, really digestible.
Is
book.
this your link for your
Yeah,
bookshop?
this is my bookshop
So people
thing.
can go check it out.
They can go check it
Yeah.
out. It doesn't
Scroll
cover
through.
everything.
I think
but
that's pretty cool.
you could see I have some of Jansky's stuff here. But obviously there's the more deeper stuff. Frank Clifford out of the UK has a great little pamphlet on the midheaven. I really like it. It's really thin, and he just has it dialed in. And he's published his own series of books, palmistry books. But that's a great book on the midheaven. I'm just going on the fly here. And I have a podcast where I interview astrologers and I ask them what they're reading. So you could see that on my bookshelf or my bookshop.org, Sparkles of Gold. Let's stop here. I'll end with this one. There's a particular book here that I always bring up. It's actually in a case here, and it's Healing Pluto Problems, an astrological guide by Donna Cunningham. She is a Cancer sun. She worked in the mental health fields and hospitals and was an amazing astrologer who unfortunately has left us, but she's always around. This is Donna. She was like Web 2.0 or 1.0. She had like a live journal site that you could still catch some of it up on there. And she was prolific. She had great forums. You can't access them anymore. She was writing a PDF for every week. But her published books, there's so many. There's one on aromatherapy that's kind of secret that no one knows about. It's amazing. But this Pluto book that she wrote from a practitioner's perspective and someone involved in the mental health field, and is no holds barred. She does not filter anything. She's honest about trauma and crisis and what Pluto brings in people's charts and solutions, and very honest and raw, like calls you out, or like when you're reading it, like, oh my God, that's what I do, you know. But the book, it has to do with shame and guilt. And a lot of times what Pluto can bring in situations, trauma, and the heavier stuff we're dealing with, you know, assault and all that kind of stuff, but also has remediation tools and understanding there. Some of it can be looked upon as outdated, but bless this person. This book has been so fundamental in my life. I keep going back to it, and I tell clients to get it. An angel in the astrology world is this person. So there's a new, I think Wisner just put out a new version of it, and you can find it if you're a Pluto, if you can't help but be a Pluto person. Some people don't like it, but some people, they can't choose no other life. You got Pluto in the first house. You got Pluto aspecting your moon, what they call a Hades moon, or Pluto's conjunct your Venus. That's a no joke way of living. It's some serious business. And so a lot of times when you see people with Pluto aspects like that, I do, which they walk towards me. I just have Pluto people come my way. I've had to train myself, and I will continue to train myself with books and counseling techniques because of what happens and where people go on their Pluto journey. But when one understands, let's say using a book or other resources, their Pluto story and go, I've seen incredible things happen to people where they are powerful, like they are empowered. And I don't do anything. I'm just a mirror, and I just watch it, and I just say, hey, you're doing it, right? So anyway, this book, I'm going to stop ranting now.
Yeah. It's a wonderful book. I definitely validate that. I go back to it all the time as well. And yeah, if you're walking the Pluto bridge, then it is no joke. So if you are having a Pluto transit, highly recommend that one. All right, so we are going to open it up for a Q&A now before we start the after party. But before we do that, I just want to give Nicholas and Taylor a chance to talk about the work that they're doing right now and also where you can find them. So Nicholas, where can our audience find you if they want to get a consultation or follow your work?
They could find me at 2 a.m. on a Saturday night on YouTube. Depending on your time zone. Sparklesofgold.com is my website. YouTube's my life. I'm pushing it hard the next couple of years. I'm going to go as big as I can, and I have a vision, and there's some things I'm going to do on there. But my bread and butter and what I feel connected to are one-on-one consultations. You can find all that info on my website, along with my book lists and Instagram, etc.
Beautiful. Thank you. Taylor, what are you up to, and where can everyone find you?
So if you are listening to this or you're here now, starting Monday, March 18th, I am hosting a free virtual summit. Lisa is in it, along with 22 other astrologers and myself. It's called the Enlightened Entrepreneur Summit, so you can check that out at theenlightenedentrepreneur.com. Sign up, register. It's going to be prizes, amazing astrologers and information so that you can get your money right and get everything right for all that stuff that I was talking about, because that's my answer and my little contribution and gift to help us all get to this more regenerative future. I'm not doing consults, but I will be having a container that comes after the summit. So if you're interested in working with me and getting a one-on-one consult, inside of the container is the way to do that. So cosmiccareerclarity.com and taylorshuler.com.
Amazing. And thank you again for having me on the summit. It was so
fun.
fun. And I am just so excited. That is such an all-star lineup of people. And I know there's so much valuable information that's going to come through that. And that happens on Monday, right?
Starts on Monday.
Starts on Monday.
Yep.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So as for me, obviously this is my space. I am seeing new clients and clients that I have seen for years and years here. And I'm doing tarot readings, astrology readings. I also have sound baths with Adina Diaz, and this happens 2 Fridays and 1 Sunday a month. So if you're interested in coming to a sound bath, just check my website. It's lisawarman.com. It's a really wonderful way to just relax, reset, and also join in healing with community. We also have yoga here every single Wednesday with Willie Cross. He's in the crowd right there. So Yeehaw Yogi. If you haven't been to one of his yoga sessions, I highly recommend it. Willie is a teacher who really focuses on empowerment through the body and through the mind and spirit. What else is happening here? The podcast once a month. So check out the website for who's going to be next on the podcast. I'm really excited to announce that guest. What else? We're open every Sunday from 11 to 4. And we have a very special eclipse workshop from Josephine. She's in the crowd. And this is happening on the 23rd of March. And it's $38 to come, right, Josephine? And it's from 1 to 4, right? 2 to 4:30. So if you are interested in workshopping the eclipses, looking at your chart, taking the information we provided today and kind of seeing what that does for you, definitely join her class. Josephine is an amazing astrologer. So thank you guys all for being here. We're going to start the Q&A. So